Hello and welcome to the third unit of the Introduction for SQL for Data Analysis for Work for Impact Academy. What we saw in the latest chapter was that we could make selections of the data and get specific data that was more relevant for us, like the latest orders, the most expensive. What we're going to do now is to take some lines of action depending on the data that we got in the former unit. That is to say also that when we selected the city of Chandigarh, the state of Chandigarh, we saw that we didn't have so many orders from this ship state. So what we need to do now is to take a line of action where we say, hey, we maybe should give a push to this state and make something different. Or maybe I also have old orders that I need to delete because they are not showing good data, recent data, because it's older than 2016 or something like that. So that's what we're going to do, modify the data. I hope you like and enjoy this third unit. Let's start using the DB browser program that we have used in the latest unit as well. And of course, all we need is to open the database again if in case we have closed it with our customers table or our orders data table, which are showing here right now. In the execute SQL, I'm going to open the file, which I think you cannot see, but it is the modify.sql file where I have all these queries commented so that nothing is happening here. If I run an execute SQL, nothing happens. What is important now is that some queries can help us to modify the data table when we want and in the way we want to do it. In order to create a new record, for instance, I will use this insert into. Insert is just to create a new entity, a new post, a new row for the table orders data. And what is important here is that you need to specify here the name of the columns that you want to change. If you put all the columns, then you need to put also all the values, which you also put here in parentheses. And it's very important that if you are, if the order number, for instance, was a column with text, you need to write this quotation mark so that it is also a text what you're sending to the database and not something else. That is the same applies like to the item total, which was numbers. Then you need to write it as numbers, not as a text. Right now, we don't have any order for this user called Susmita1. So if this query is written correctly and we execute it, seems like there's some syntax error. Let's see in Susmita1. Susmita, yeah, he doesn't like maybe my number. Let's write Susmita1. Exactly. So if I write now this text with Susmita1, and I go now to the data and I go to the buyer name. If I write now Susmita, so I will get the buyer name Susmita1. It didn't exist before this order, so I just created a new order for this buyer name. And this can be useful in case you sometimes manually need to create an order that didn't go through the website or the database directly. So let's comment out this one, and now let's check what happens if I, instead of writing all the column names in parentheses like this and specifying the column names and then giving the values as I did before with the parentheses and with the quotation marks, what would happen if I just give the values directly without specifying the columns? If I change this Susmita1 to Susmita2, so that we don't get the same mistake as we did before, if I now run the query, I will get a new order for this Smita 2 that didn't exist before. As you see, the only thing I'm doing is just to filter all the buyer names that are starting with SUS. So Smith 2 is appearing here as well. So again, if I just run the insert into with the table and I give the values, the same amount of values, that is the same amount of columns, I will get a new record, a new row with the values that I have sent. And it's the same, this can be useful if you just need to create new records without doing it manually in the browser or something like that. But what happens, do you remember, we were talking about prescriptive diagnosis, prescription, and taking lines of action. What happens if I found out that uh, this customer, Susmita, didn't have the correct email? I can check that in the customers table, and if I go to a filter here in the customer email for Susmita, I see, if I draw this a little bit, that Susmita is not correctly written. And that's why maybe she's not getting my invoices and she is not being correctly invoiced. Well, that, of course, I could change it here manually and write instead of Gmail as it is the correct one. But sometimes we want to do it dynamically using queries instead of writing manually, specifically if we want to do an update for many customers at the same time. And then what I would write is this query that says update customers, set customer email the correct email, the gmail.com, where the customer email has this Gmail inside, which is not looking good. So this query is going to find in the customer email any kind of string that is containing this string's Gmail, which we don't want to have. And instead it's going to write sasmita@gmail.com in the customer email column. So it's going to correct the wrong email address and set a correct one. So if we execute the file, we get no mistakes, no errors. We go to the browse data, and if I now check on Sasmita, Sasmita has Gmail and not Gmail as it was before. I can write the changes just to see that the changes have been done. So that's great. We can update one or several points of or rows of table with the update query or command. We can also, since we saw that the ship state of Chandigarh wasn't getting many orders, we want to increase the amount of orders in this state. All we can do is to give these customers a higher discount. Instead of a 10% discount, we can give 20%. If I browse the data in the orders data table and I close this filter and I go to Chandigarh and I put this in the ship city or in the ship state, in the ship state better. Let's see here. Ship city. I can see that I have 3 orders in the ship city of Chandigarh where the item they have paid more than 400 crowns, which is good. But as we said before, we only got 3 records, 3 rows, and this was not the optimal. We wanted to sell more in this city. So we can update dynamically in the code column. If we check here, there's a code column right here, which right now has no text, no code, no campaign. So in order to change this and give to the people in Chandigarh a 20% discount on their orders, what I can do is to update the orders data set the code to 20% discount, which maybe my back office can check later and invoice correctly. And if it's more than 400, I'm going to give them this 20% discount. So let's run it. It is successful. If I browse the data now, I see that these two orders here and here did get a campaign discount of 20%. So this is a dynamic change of the database for the orders from Chandigarh. Some other use cases for modifying data with SQL. Of course, we saw before that we had like 140 or something orders which were quite ancient, quite old, uh, which were not relevant data for us because it was not telling us that fresh data contains orders that were good orders, expensive orders from good customers. We could also see here in the orders data that we have several uh, several orders that have been returned to us. That means that they haven't paid anything because it has been no cash, no selling. So this data, of course, I want to get rid of it because it's okay for me to make a diagnostic analysis or to predict. But once I have done it, and once I know which customers it is, and once I know what it can depend on, I don't want to take this into account in my revenues because my revenues are going to give me a zero or maybe a misleading 549 or a misleading 449. So if I want to take into account these orders in the future, or better said, if I want to take my orders without these orders, what I want to do is to delete those orders which have order status returned to seller and which are maybe later than before than 2014. So I don't want to go too recent. I just want to take the ones until 2014. So if you remember, we had 15 lines here, 15 orders that have been returned to seller. But if we now run our execute, our delete from orders that our order status return to seller and order date less than 2014, and we execute the SQL, we get no errors. And if we browse the data, we only have 9 now. And if we check the order date, they are from 2021, 2020, 2015. All they are later than 2013. So this is more fresh data, more actual, more relevant, and it's going to have better influence on our on how we understand the data from now on. These are the queries that I have prepared for you, and I hope that you can yourself think about when do you need to take a line of action, when do you need to update your tables or delete records from your tables, or where is it useful for you to insert or to make a mass update of a column. That's something that is more up to your own business and up to your own products and customers. So something that you have to take into account a little bit by yourself. But if you learn this insert and update and delete commands, then you can do this dynamically and with no effort. So next steps is that, of course, you make the exercises, practical exercises that are in the channel, that you start reading the literature for the next unit, which is going to be about joins and aggregations and subqueries. And that's pretty much it. I hope you're enjoying it, and as much as I am doing, and I hope to see you in the next unit.